So we are in week 3 of our collection, Rewire. I believe, not just this year, but any year, it's the best way to start your year. It's the best way to lead to the best year that you've had. And it's rewiring the way that you think, because most of life's battles are won and lost in the mind. And you go, well, that's not true. It is. Everything that you do starts up here. And that's why it's so confusing. I'm a parent, and if you're a parent, you kind of know this. Your kid does something strange or weird or erratic or whatever, and you're like, why did you do that? He's like, I don't know. Not possible. There is a reason why you did it, right? You might not understand the reason, but there's a reason why you did it. Either you wanted to, you felt the urge to break something, whatever it may be. Most battles, life's battles are won and lost in the mind. So the life you have is a reflection of the thoughts that you think. What comes into your mind comes out in your life. If you cannot have a positive life with a negative mind, and you control what you think, but you can't always control what people do. But if you control what you think, you can control what you do. And so we've been using this scripture throughout 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5. It says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." We discussed what that means in previous messages, so go on YouTube and find out more about that. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Your life will always move in the direction of your strongest thoughts. The thoughts that dominate your mind is going to be your output. You are essentially a big flesh computer. And I know that sounds strange, but that's what it is, okay? I told my son the same thing, and he looked at me weird. He's like, what? That sounds weird. I'm like, it is, but it's the truth. Anything that you have up here, processing, programming you put into your mind is what you output. So if you're constantly putting things in your mind that about fashion and about worried about your looks, you're always going to be worried about your looks. You're always going to be worried about, what am I going to put on? Are people going to like it, right? If you're constantly thinking about cars, you're always going to think about, what's your car look like? What are people going to think about it? Whatever you put in, I just struck the chord with somebody. Whatever you put in is what comes out, and we call those neural pathways. The more you think a thought, the easier it is to think that thought. It's like a ditch. You dig a ditch to make water go in a certain direction. The deeper you dig that ditch, the more water it's going to hold, and the easier it is that's going to flow through that. So the same thing in your brain. So every time you have a thought, an experience, a path is created. And the more that you think about that, the more you harp on it, the more you experience it again, it's just going to create a deeper groove, so it's easier to go down that path. On the dark side of it, if you're a person that suffered from abuse growing up, and you were constantly told that you're not good enough, you're never going to be good enough, you'll always fall short, it's going to be built into your mind, and the easier thought for you to have that you will never be enough. That everything you do will never measure up. It will never be good enough. You can never be satisfied with yourself because the grooves are there, and that's the easiest path to think. So we have to create new neural pathways. We end up in places of like cognitive bias, mental filters, mental framework. Cognitive bias is the mistake in reasoning based on personal preferences or beliefs. It's basically your mental filter to life and how it impacts you. Here's an example. So Hannah started watching this new show. She's really into we're going to take this crappy house, and make it nice, those kind of shows, And so there's a new show in Galveston that she's been really watching. And I'm like, Galveston? I was like, oh, that's cool. You kind of recognize. And I'm like, man, I bet that's tough for the film crew, because I've experienced Galveston, and your experience of Galveston might be different than my experience of Galveston, but my experience of Galveston hasn't always been great, all right? It hasn't always been treated very well or cleaned, and so I've seen a lot of trash on the beach. a lot of very opportunistic businesses that will take advantage of you because it's just a tourism kind of spot. I don't know what a better way to put this, but the mating rituals that happen on the beach, right? You go to the beach and it's just, they're covering just enough to be legal, right? Within centimeters, right? And it's things you don't really want to see, and they're doing things, and it's all really just to attract the opposite sex, all that kind of stuff. And so that's my experience at Galveston. And so they're like, we're going to make a show. And I'm like, how? So I started watching the show with Hannah, and masterful work of being able to frame the right shots. There's never a long-lasting shot of the beach. You don't really ever see the people they're on the beach. If you see the beach, it's on the seawall and it's a skateboard going by, and then it's gone, right? It's like only a couple of seconds. Not enough time to really inspect what's going on. And they kind of avoid camera angles. So framing is really important. What are they showing? And they do a phenomenal job. So to the point, if someone has never been to Galveston and they come to Houston, they're like, hey, I want to go to Galveston. And I'll be like, why? Because their mental image, their frame of Galveston will be much different than mine. Now, I'm not trying to hate. I love Galveston. If you're from Galveston, no offense to you or anything like that. I would say the same thing about Houston, right? It's like anybody that it's their hometown, they're like, well, it's not that great. I mean, there's these areas, right? You can kind of dismiss. That's kind of the way I feel about it. We end up with these default filters and default frames. It's why people respond differently to the same situation. That's why when somebody that's never been there sees the show and then you bring up Galveston, their mental image is different than mine because they haven't had my experiences. It's not that the facts are different, it's the filter. It's how it is framed. It's why some people, when they receive feedback, they're immediately offended. And why some people, when they receive feedback, they're thankful. It's how you frame it. Even if it's negative, even if it's meant to hurt you, this is a top leadership lesson, and this is how the leaders that you think they get a lot of, get attacked a lot, they take information and they don't take offense to it. Right? And they're not necessarily thank the people for being rude to them or anything like that, but they take the information and they're thankful for it because they can change how they operate. They can change how they speak and how they communicate, and it can cause a different effect as a leader. It's not about the facts, it's about having a filter. So today, what we're going to be talking about, it's one of those things that's easier said than done, and I get that, right? And we'll get to that. So bear with me in this process. It's kind of like what Jesus did for us in Christianity. He came, he made it simple, but the carry out is hard. Only one way to the Father, and that's through him. Simple. What laws should we obey? Just love each other as I have loved you. Simple, right? So what I'm going to be asking you to do for a better year, for a better life, is reframe. We're going to be talking about reframing. It's creating a different way of looking at a situation, a person, or relationship by changing its meaning. A different filter. It's about changing your perception. It's changing your cognitive restructuring. Thinking differently about somebody, a place, or a moment that you're having to live. Here's an example of it. Warning, there's going to be some baseball references today. Here's the first one. So in baseball, between a pitcher and a catcher, if you've watched the World Series, you kind of notice this. They talk about it, when they're the announcers, they talk about framing the pitch. Okay, what framing the pitch is when a catcher gets down, he makes a call, right? And if it's just a little bit outside, catchers do this. And the really good ones, you almost can't catch it because they're so good at it, right? They'll grab it really quick and pull it in, right? And so if this is the line, and they caught it out here, they pull it in really fast. And they almost can make their body in a motion as if the ball was already there, but they catch it here and they pull it there, making it look like it came to that point. They're really good at framing. And a good framing catcher, it can make the world's difference for a no-hitter. For a pitcher that is just on fire and they're doing really well, but they're just got a little bit off to the point where the ump can't catch it. Because here's the thing. The catcher can't control where the ball goes. He can make a call and kind of say, hey, can you throw it in this general area? But he can't control where the pitcher is throwing it, but he can control how he catches it. He can control how he receives the pitch and tries to give it the best outlook possible to hopefully be called a strike. Okay? And that also ensures safety to the pitcher, that he doesn't have to throw it down the middle every time for it to be called a strike, that his catcher can actually make it look better than it really was. It's about how you receive the information, how it has been framed. A lot of you have experienced this, mostly in your marriages. It's when your spouse gets home and they have bags and they bought some things and they're already starting a pitch in an argument for what they've already bought. And they're going, hey, I want to show you what I got. Let me tell you how much I saved, right? Have you had that? Let me tell you how much I saved. I saved $500, but how much did you spend? It was $1,000 originally, but I saved $500. Can you believe it? Yeah, I believe that $500 left our bank account for whatever thing. I mean, I'm sure we needed it. I'm not hating on if we needed it or not, but it's the framing. That's you all do it. You frame. You're like, I know this probably wasn't a good choice, but I'm going to frame this right. We need to take those same skills, because when you're at the store, you can't control the price of things. They're the ones that decide that. But you can control how you frame it and how you buy it and what it's for and how you can justify it. All of you, I can pretty well guarantee, all of you have done this week. And it's you frame the weather. And what you did is, even though it was a pain, it was a pain for me. I had to get out, a heat torch and all that stuff to kind of warm up some pipes, to get the pipes in because of all the freeze and all the ice. Had to go to I'm like, you know what, I'm not even going to risk it. At night, I'm going to go and I'm going to turn it off at the city's end and it just bleed all the pipes. And that way I don't have to worry about anything icing up or freezing or breaking. I don't have to worry about anybody. And then I'll turn it back on when it gets warmer. And that's a pain to have to do that. It really is. It's uncomfortable. It's cold outside. I'm outside in the dark fishing in a black box in the grass. It's just kind of like, I don't want to have to do that. But this is what everybody has said, and I guarantee you've said it too. At least it wasn't as bad as 2021, right? At least it wasn't as bad as, that's framing. You were doing it. You were reframing the situation. Because you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. Paul was very good at framing. He was great, a great example of it, because he dreamed of going to Rome. It was to preach. It was go to tell people about the gospel, and they would just be throwing flowers at him, going, yes, Paul, thank you for the truth. But he ended up in prison. That's not how he saw this thing going. He wanted to be preaching and not in prison. It's kind of the same for us. We work hard, we get a degree, but the career didn't pan out. And you had to change course, go a different direction. You honored God in dating, trying to save yourself. You married your sweetheart, and then you end up divorcing. It didn't work out. You're at this point in life, and you expected something different, something to be better. Some would call that a midlife crisis. It didn't pan out the way you thought it did. A reframing is needed. And for Paul, we would not have blamed him if he said something like this. And this is not real. Let me put that out there, okay? I did create this, okay? This is what we call the version of the New Winer's version, okay? This would be what Paul would have said, what we would have said instead. In Philippians 4:12 through 13, the New Winer's version could have said, now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me really sucks. As a result of the hell I've been through, I'm quitting Christianity and never going back to or writing to another church. If you intended to go somewhere and hoping to be welcomed because you have great truth for them, but then they throw you in the slammer, you would have been like, you know what? I'm done with you all. You cut me off well enough on the way to church, and I just might turn that trailer around and go back home. Like, you know what? They don't deserve it. That's kind of how you would feel. That's how we would feel. And then even in the moment, the food was horrible. There was rats. I'm sure he was fighting the biggest rats you've ever seen for his food in the prison. The guards didn't let them bathe, or the guards themselves didn't bathe. There's a lot of stench in there. Execution was imminent at all times. You didn't know if you were going to die the next day. You could end up in a place where it's understandable. You would hate life. I'm sick of this, right? My microphone goes out, and I'm like, I can't preach anymore. Sorry, guys. Right? But Paul, suffering, really suffering, and not in our prison conditions. That would have been a cakewalk compared to what he had to experience. But this is what he said instead. Philippians 12:13, NIV, New International Version. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. It just sickens me how positive it is. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. What most people would think is the worst thing that happened to him in their life, he says, no, I'm framing this for good. I'm going to look at this a different way. He is chained to the most influential Roman guards, essentially. He has their ear for 8 hours. He gets to give 8-hour sermons, just beating the truth into them. Not spitting on them, not throwing hateful slurs back at them, because I'm sure they were not being nice to him, but preaching truth and kindness and love. In his head, they would say they thought I was a prisoner, but they were the real prisoners because they had to stand next to me. They had to watch me, because if I got out, the Jewish leaders would be real scared because of the stir that he was making. Then we continue on. In verse 14, it says, and because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. These aren't metaphorical chains. These are real chains. And they hear about it. They get the letters from Paul. And they're going, man, his life is in danger. He cannot have enjoyment. They're doing everything purposefully. He can't enjoy himself or have any kind of peace or anything like that. But yet, it is so important to him that he is still preaching the gospel, even to the ones that are hurting him, even his enemies. And they're going, what are we doing? Why aren't we jumping on this? Why aren't we doing everything that we can in the freedom that we have? So it motivated them. They dared all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. God used his chains. Paul would say, God used my chains to embolden the Christ followers around me. So, the process goes like this: reframing your story and your relationship. So the first step to reframing, it's not what you think it is probably. Number one is to thank God for what didn't happen. Thank God for what didn't happen. It's so easy to focus on what happened to you that you forget to thank God for what didn't happen to you, that what you got to escape. Our thoughts, our frames shape what we experience. And this is, we view something, we go, this is going to be so hard, but it's going to be fun in trying it. Trying new hobbies, trying new things, new ways at work to stretch yourself, to put yourself out there. I don't public speak, but I'm going to start learning. I don't speak a different language, but I'm going to start learning. It's hard to do, but it can be fun. You can love the challenge of life. You can say, I can't stand to go to these events. We just went through them probably in the holidays. I can't stand to go to these events with some of these people. I know they're my blood, but man, do they irritate me, right? But you're like, but I get to be with my family. I get to go to these things with my family. You put a positive spin on it, right? You reframe what it is. Some of the easiest ways that we do this You come, like, when I was a kid, I would come home and I would tell my parents, I got a D in history, but I didn't fail, right? Right? That's a framing. Could be worse, right? I missed the deadline at work. I didn't get the bonus, but I wasn't fired. You know, I still have a job. I was in a car wreck, a fender bender. It was expensive, but at least no one was hurt. You hear that a lot too. My flight was delayed. There was problems with the plane. My schedule is messed up, but I'd rather be on the ground than up there when they find it out. Right? You reframe. There's a whole scheme of things, right, that they're not that big of a deal, but we make them a big deal because we're framing it wrong. I'm not saying to minimize things are a big deal. I'm not saying that at all. But don't let it decide how you're going to move forward. Don't let those big interruptions in life decide how you are going to move forward. You decide what you're going to do with it. You get to decide your filter, your frame, how you're going to view it, how it's going to play out in your life, how you're going to let it affect you. What are you going to let in? How much am I going to hold? Do I need to go talk to other people? Do I need to talk to a counselor? Do I need to talk to a friend? You frame it. So first, thank God for what didn't happen. Number 2, let's get ahead of the game. Let's practice pre-framing. Practice pre-framing. Like I said, our thoughts and our frames shape what we experience. Your perspective determines how you behave. Your perspective determines how you behave. If you are single and your perspective is, they'll never go out with me. They'll never give me a chance. They'll laugh in my face. I should take up CrossFit and get fit and get buff and try to make myself as attractive as possible. And we get that shallow, and we think about, just this past week, we were driving by a sign, and my son saw a billboard, and it's like for a dental company, and it says, give yourself a sexy smile. And Gage's like, what's a sexy smile? Well, like, this is going to take some explaining, right? And so I explained it. I was like, it's basically a shallow way of thinking that you're attracted. If you made your smile better, you'll be more sexy because you're more attractive, blah, 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 all these things. That was free. That wasn't in my notes. Yeah, there he is. He heard me. And you ask yourself, why should I try? You believe, why not? Maybe they'll actually say yes. Maybe, as weird as I am, they'll be into me. Well, I took the chance, and now we have 2 kids, and I get to have a endless slumber party with my best friend. It's one of the best things. It's really cool. Perpetual slumber party. You pre-frame it. Before you decide their decision, before you make up your mind, pre-frame it. They could say yes, so I should give it a shot. Here's another baseball story for you. Prepare yourselves. When I was a sophomore, no, actually, I was a junior. I was a junior in high school, and I played a lot of select ball. So not during the normal school year. We would play during the summers and stuff like that, and it was super hot and sweaty. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. And so I remember this one time, I went to this tournament. I think it was in Brenham. It's a drive. You get up in the morning, you drive out there, you play like 5 games, you're completely wiped for like 3 days. So one of these games, and this was common to happen, there was a local college team, right? College players, and they came to the tournament to just play as much as they can, right? And so you could do that in these times within the parameters of what they did. So as a high school team, we end up playing a college team, right? They are better than we are, right? And it was my turn to pitch. And so I pre-framed it. I decided, you know what? There's no discounting or arguing that they are definitely better than us. They have more skills, they're faster, they're stronger, they've played more, they've done more, right? They were handpicked for their college team. They had to accept us in high school, right? Because you got on the team. So it's like, how are we going to do this? So I told myself, I'm just going to give it my all. I'm just going to do the best I can, right? I'm going to give it. I ended up holding this college team 0-0 until the 7th inning. And yeah, thank you. Finally, somebody celebrated me. I've been waiting 20 years for that. No. And how I did it is I had a nasty changeup. I did a 3-finger changeup, and you take the ball and you stuff it in there. And the key is not the speed, right? You got to have a fastball that's fast too. But the key is how you sell it. So if I wanted my changeup to work, to be effective, I got to make it look like I'm throwing a fastball. So when I throw a fastball, if I'm coming out of my shoes, I got to come out of my shoes throwing a changeup as well. And how the law of inertia and all that works is that when I would get to this point, instead of flicking my wrist, they would say, like, rub it down the wall. I'm giving you some great baseball lessons right now. You would take it and you would go down the wall, and you would essentially just release this thing, and it would just be a floating bubble that would just come down. And these college players who were used to people throwing mid-90s, they were just falling all over themselves trying to hit this thing. And the coach over there is like, what is happening? How is this possible, right? I go back to the dugout, and they're like, yeah, you're doing it. Woo, right? They love it. This time we only go 7 innings. In the 7th inning, one of their great players, great hitters, he said, you know what? I'm just only going to swing for change-ups. And he figured me out and knocked it out of the park, and we lost 1-0. And so you could look at that and go, oh, I failed. But no, I framed it right. I said, you know what? I held my own against guys that were 4 years older than me, more talented than me, and I might not have been the fastest or be able to throw the fastest or have the best curve or whatever it may be, but I held them. I held my own to the point where that coach, that college coach, came to me and says, great job. And he thanked me. He said, because they came here thinking that this was going to be easy. They came here thinking, so you taught them a lesson. Thank you so much. To not underestimate anybody. And I was like, wow, you're welcome, right? You can pay me later. So I learned about myself. When you pre-frame and you put yourself out there, you learn things about yourself. You give yourself a chance to prove yourself to yourself. So then the framing gets easier and easier as you go. So I learned then that I can play well under pressure. I'm great under pressure as long as I have the facts straight and I'm okay with that. I know that I'm the underdog. I know that I'm coming this behind, but I'm going to give it my all anyways. Have your frame picked out already. Before you walk into that meeting, before you get up for the day, before you go to sleep, have your frame picked out for what's coming next. So that's number 2, pre-frame it. Number 3, look for God's goodness. You find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for God's goodness, you're going to find it. If you're not, you're never going to find it. You find what you're looking for. If you want to see bad, negative things, have challenges, you're going to receive those things. That's all you're going to see. However, if you want to see good and positive opportunities, they're going to show up and they're going to be in front of you because you're looking for them. It's a difference between a buzzard and a hummingbird. What does a buzzard look for? Carcasses, right? Roadkill, gross things. So if you're like a buzzard and you're constantly looking for the bad stuff, you're only going to find bad stuff. Be like, well, there's no sweet stuff. Well, let's talk to the hummingbird. What does the hummingbird look for? Sweet stuff. And they find it all the time because it's there. That's why you don't see hummingbirds at carcasses. Because there's no sweet there. You got to frame it right. You got to know what you're looking for. Decide what my outlook going to be. What's my frame going to be? You've been unemployed. You're going through divorce. You've been abused. You've gone through stage 4 cancer. Your child is suffering. These are all bad things and facts that happen in life. But that's not the only thing that happens in life. If you are constantly looking at the bad things that happen to you, you end up in a place of victimhood. And if you end up in a place of victimhood, and that's where you live, like, I'm just a victim, you're always going to be a victim. You will be setting yourself up for people to take advantage of you all the time. Anything that happens to you, even if nobody's trying to take advantage of you, oh, I stubbed my toe, oh, poor me, We end up in that place. You ever having a pity party? That's what a pity party is. It's victimhood. I've had many pity parties in my life. Like, if something didn't go right, and then something normal happened that caused me a little pain. It's like, oh, why me, Lord? Why have you forsaken me? And God's like, no, you tripped. You weren't watching where you were walking. I'm not out to get you. Look for the goodness. Cognitive reframing. You can be your own therapist in that. That's basically what therapists do. They take your facts and in your information, and they ask, how are you framing this? And they go, pull out a little bit. Look at the bigger picture. Maybe shift your image. You're missing something over here. Therapists help you reframe. You can do that for yourself. You're empowered that you decide the meaning of things. And let Jesus help you decide. It's not all on your own. If you don't know how to feel about something, just say, Jesus, help. Help me see this through your eyes. I don't know if I should be mad about it or happy about it. I don't know. Can you help me see? And he will reveal things to you. You will find yourself in these surreal moments. You're like, man, I just heard from Jesus. He helped me clear my vision, reframe what I'm seeing so I can see it better. That's why we say for me to live is in Christ and to die is gain. That's a framing. Either way, you win. Either way, you win. We wouldn't choose some circumstances, but we're thankful for what God did in it. If he works in all things for our good, we reject the unhealthy, the default frames, and the frames that say, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, I'm dumb, I'm ugly. They'll never let me. They'll never accept me. Those are the easier frames because those are the pity party frames. They're cheap, shabby, they don't hold up. Reframing. It's not passively receiving circumstances, it's actively interpreting them. It's being involved. It's like active listening, right? You're showing and you're saying things back, showing that you're listening and you're a part of the conversation, that you're not just a wall that's getting hit, right? If you're the kind of person, and I know that like some people are quieter than others, but if you're the kind of person that people have to go, are you hearing me? Are you listening? Don't look at anybody. You look forward. Don't turn. Don't do anything like that. Look forward. Do you hear me? Just again, yesterday I went through this. I was talking to one of my kids about something, and I said, "Do you understand me?" And I thought about it, and he's like, "Yeah, I understand." I thought, "Oh man, that sounds kind of harsh." So I changed how I said it. Do you compute? And he's like, "Why'd you say that?" I was like, "Well, it sounds nicer than do you understand me?" And I kept saying that over and over again, but I need to know that you're hearing me, right? Do you compute? Actively interpret life. If you are just receiving and you're not active in interpreting it, life's going to decide what you're going to do. Life is going to decide how you're going to live. Not interpreting God through circumstances, interpreting my circumstances through God's goodness. That's the process. You take these circumstances and go, well, why does God hate me? No, it's take the circumstances. God, what do you want to do with these? What can we do with this, God? This is what I've been offered, and it's probably different than anybody else, and maybe less or unfair, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It's my circumstance. What do you want to do with it, God? How do we want to move forward? And for some of you, you think, that's too hard. Bill, you don't understand my circumstances. Just how thick and strong that frame is. That frame I didn't even make it. It was given to me. I was told to live this way. I was told I was always going to be this way. You don't know how I was treated, how unfair it was, how attacked I was, the trauma. It's not possible. Well, I'm here to tell you it is. What I'm about to show you might cause a reaction in you. And I'm sorry, and I'm also not sorry, because it's the intention of it. I want to introduce you to some people. If you have those photos. I'm going to let you look at a few. Some of you might know what's going on here. Some of you probably don't. But you have these pictures of these people. They don't look the same. They're not from the same family, but they're close, and they have the stethoscope on. They're listening. Every one of these are people who are meeting the person who received a heart from a loved one that they had. These were donors. These were parents that had children that lost their life. and they put their kid on the donor list, and somebody else got that heart. And through programs and opportunities, and they opt into these things, they had the chance to go meet the person that received the heart of their loved one that they would rather them be alive. But instead of staying stuck and going, man, it's so terrible that I lost them. Why would this happen to me? Nothing can ever be better in life. They go, wait a minute. Let's reframe this. I can't control what happened to my loved one, my child, my father, my sister, my brother, my cousin. I can't control these things. I can't control what happens to my husband or my wife. But in the circumstances, the loss of their life can give life to someone else. Talk about a reframing. To the point where they get to meet this person. And they're not avoiding it. They're coming at it head on going, oh, I want to hug the person who received this heart. Someone that can't frame well would be angry. They would be mad at them. Why you? And why doesn't my kid get to live? They could say all of that, and they would be completely justified. But they reframed. They said, you know what? I'm excited this happened for you. I'm excited that even though they're not with us anymore, their heart gets to live on and give life to somebody else. If these people can reframe such a terrible experience into something beautiful, so can you. So don't tell me you can't. Don't tell me that your frame is too strong. Don't tell me that your neural pathways are too deep, because they can do it. And they're not superhuman. We call them superhuman. We tell them they're better than everybody else. They're just humans. They weren't given some ability that you don't have. You can do it as well. If they can do it, so can you. But you must decide and make steps to reframe. Paul said, what happened to me actually served to advance the gospel. Heart donors, what happened, the nightmare that I went through, life can still thrive from it. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. And this is hard, and I get that. Some of you are immediately thinking about all the frames in your life. I don't want you to tackle all of them right now. Your homework this week, your challenge this week, is I want you to pick one thing. Pick one place in your life that is just full of negativity. One place in your life that is constantly a burden. Something that even just the thought of it makes you sick. Something like that. Find that one thing and reframe. Find that one thing and reframe. You're like, Bill, I've tried. I don't know where. Ask Jesus for help. Say, Jesus, I don't know what to do with this. I'm putting it in your hands. God, you say you're the God of goodness and you make things all good. Make this good. Show me. Show me how to do it. Lead me down a path to reframing whatever it is in your life. And then once you do it, write it down. What we talked about last week, write it down, say it to yourself, pray about it until you believe it. Write it down, say it to yourself, pray about it until you believe it. Use Alexa if you have to. Whatever it takes, do it. And I guarantee your reframing will rewire your brain, and 2024 will be your best year yet. Let's pray. Jesus, this is not easy. The concept is so simple, but the carry out is hard because it's linked to pain. It's linked to suffering. It's linked to trauma. All of these things that drag us down, that make us to where it's hard to get rid of this idea, these pathways in our minds, these frames, these filters that we have. But Lord, in your name we can do it. Because if that's our weakness, you can show off and be strong. So I pray in those moments, as we step into this week, picking that frame in our life and taking it somewhere else, reframing what it is, whether we need to demolish it, make additions to it, modify the frame, whatever it may be, show us the way. If we fall short, if our strength falls short and we become weak, give us strength. Holy Spirit, empower us to reframe just like Paul did in prison, so that we can live a life that thrives instead of just living. Let your will be done at Village Heights. Let your will be done in us this week. In Jesus' powerful name I pray. Amen.